We have an update now to a story we've been following for a couple of years now. Tomorrow, attorneys with the ACLU of Texas will urge a federal appeals court to stop book removals in Llano County in the library. They say these removals violate the First Amendment. Joining me now is Brian Klosterboer, an attorney with the ACLU of Texas, to share some insight on this case. Brian, thanks so much for taking the time for us here on KVUE this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with this. If you could, give us a little background on the case and the hearing coming up tomorrow.
Yes, this case has been going on now for a little bit over 2 years. We've seen kind of a sweep of book bans across Texas, particularly in public school districts. This case is a little bit unique in that it's actually a public county library in Llano that has been banning and removing books from the shelves. There's a hearing tomorrow before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, the federal court of appeals that presides over Texas, and it's before the entire court en banc. And this will be the first time that a federal appeals court considers what the legal standards are under the First Amendment when politicians try to remove books from a public library shelf.
Can you further explain that, how the First Amendment plays into the arguments that are going to be made?
Absolutely. Public libraries have always been places where parents can take their kids, where any of us can go learn and seek information, even going back to the country's founding and before Benjamin Franklin founded the first lending library in the United States before we were even a country. And so these have always been places where it's up to people and writers and librarians, not to the politics of the moment, to dictate kind of what ideas or viewpoints are in the library. The Attorney General of Texas, as well as Florida and other states, has filed an amicus brief in this case. They argue that the First Amendment does not apply at all to public libraries. And they argue that government can remove and censor books with no oversight whatsoever from the Constitution. That's an incredibly dangerous proposition, and it's also wrong. We filed an amicus brief in this case with a whole coalition of other groups, including the Texas Freedom to Read Project, and the plaintiffs in the case tomorrow will be arguing to the entire Fifth Circuit to apply the correct First Amendment scrutiny so that the government can't just censor any books at once without any oversight whatsoever.
Finally, what could the decision in this hearing mean for book restrictions, not just here in Texas, but really across the country, both in school libraries, public libraries? How could that affect the entire country?
It's a really important case. Right now we're seeing many school districts across Texas that are, facing political pressure to remove certain books. The majority of books being targeted deal with anti-racism, as well as with LGBTQ plus characters and identities. And this is an important case, for our circuit here in Texas and our neighboring states. And it's one that could eventually go up to the U.S. Supreme Court as we continue, talking to judges and others about how important it is to protect all viewpoints in our libraries and not just ones that certain politicians prefer.
Brian Klosterboer, an attorney with the ACLU of Texas. Thank you so much for joining us here on KVUE News at 4 this Monday afternoon.